What's up, YouTube? Welcome to a special episode of the Upland Show. It's been a while since we had McSqueeb on the show. Super stoked to have him here. McSqueeb, what have you been up to, my man?
It's just good to see you, bro. I love LOYLDOYL. He's my bro. What have I been up to? Just working hard, but also I am an advisor to two new crypto projects that I'm pretty excited about. That should be debuting here in the next several months. But working hard on those crypto projects and just trying to do well in Upland. So that's what I'm up to.
Good stuff. So, what do you feel about some of the recent controversy, if you will, about Mark Cuban saying buying land in the Metaverse is the dumbest shit ever? And we just recently, McSqueeb and I, read Dirk's response to that opinion.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of interesting, if you haven't yet, it's on Uplands News and Events. You can see the Metaverse is the platform moment for Web3.
Yeah.
Or land is the platform moment for Web3. So, definitely all of you, I would highly suggest going out and reading that article. But McSqueeb also studied economics, majored in economics. I know Dirk has a PhD in economics. And I think that is a really key, educational background when you're researching the impact of Web3, of the Metaverse, what's its effect on the economy long term.
Sure.
What were some of your thoughts as you read through that article of Dirk's response to Mark Cuban?
Yeah, it was a well-written article. First of all, I just want to say that, I have a degree in economics, but it's a bachelor's degree, and it's managerial economics, which is really more about microeconomics around small business economics. And of course, even though when you have a microeconomics degree, you have to study macroeconomics. And that's really where Dirk, I think, shines, is in macroeconomics. He's looking at the global economy within the metaverse, and he's approaching it way more thoughtfully. Critics of Dirk would say that, of course, he has a vested or biased, interest in erring on the side of why digital land has value, and why it's not the stupidest shit ever, as Mark Cuban so gracefully said. However, having said that, I think Dirk approaches the entire concept of virtual real estate in that article in an incredibly thoughtful way that actually, in my opinion, absolutely and totally and all-encompassingly schools Mark Cuban. I think Mark Cuban obviously is a bright guy. You cannot have the success that he's had if you don't understand business and investment principles. However, I don't know that I get the feeling that Mark Cuban has not done enough of his own individual investment of time into the metaverse. I know he's familiar with crypto. I know he has his gems that he has invested in. But when it comes to the potential of the metaverse and the economy within the metaverse, I don't know that he has put enough time into it. Obviously, it's not enough time as Dirk has. Dirk has his response is incredibly thoughtful. The other thing I would say is that Dirk is basically making the case for what role land plays in the metaverse, and how it is comparable to any other real economy. And I would 100% agree. Where I would say there might be some flaw to that logic is if the metaverse that he's referring to has just very little demand, or a very small community. Then the assets and resources within that metaverse aren't going to be worth much. It's going to be speculative. But his effort recently to bring all metaverses together, I think, is going to really enable the metaverse generally to really allow land to be a very valuable asset. So in short, he did a phenomenal job in his response to Mark Cuban. I do think Mark Cuban was just flexing. He's with the Altcoin Daily guys and just trying to kind of just be a badass. And sure, he's a badass, whatever. But I think at this particular moment, he was acting a little bit more out of ignorance than he would normally care to admit.
Okay, yeah.
That's my response.
Yeah, that's man, a lot to think about there. I gave my kind of feedback that Upland is in a very key strategic market because of and in Dirk's response he talks about building the platform with scarcity, right?
Yeah.
Because Mark Cuban's big point was land is just I don't know how he phrased it, but it's kind of hype based, and Dirk's response is well, it's actually how did he phrase it? He said if you build it with scarcity constantly there, and you're slowly releasing cities like Upland is doing, as the community is growing, that's actually a better way to do it, because how can you build a community around a metaverse?
Right.
A metaverse has to start with land cells, right? And it's interesting Dirk brought up this whole point of what the four principles of an economy are: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship.
Right.
And how Upland is using all of those principles as they scale, compared to this spectator kind of view he's saying that some of these other metaverses have, that only brands can have value in some of these other metaverses. He's saying Upland has this user-generated content, kind of like YouTube or social media, that gives it, or like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, that's all user-generated content.
Right.
Upland is essentially trying to be a business, almost turning social media into a business model. Yeah. If you will.
Yeah, I think Mark Cuban was basically saying that, hey, it's all about community. And don't try to sell land unless you have a very thriving, healthy community. And I think what Dirk is saying is, hey, how are we going to sell land? How are we going to develop a community without having some demand for land to sell to this growing community? In other words, which comes first, community or land? And Mark Cuban is saying you got to have community before you can sell land. And Dirk is saying it's neither one or the other. He's saying, why can't we not balance the growth of the community as we manage, from a careful perspective, the scarcity vis-a-vis the demand of and supply of the digital real estate, and allow that to be the driver that grows the community. And I think that's a very thoughtful approach, and that's really reflectant of what Upland has done heretofore in Upland, is that they have said, look, we're not going to just release every city that we have plans to release all at once, and all the properties just crash, because there's just more supply of properties than there are community to create demand for those properties. But instead, he's saying, we're going to release San Francisco. Number one, we're going to release San Francisco. And people go nuts on San Francisco. And it grows the community. And then he says, okay, now we're going to add...
Now we're going to release Manhattan.
Now we're going to release Manhattan. And it grows the community. Instead of saying, hey, everybody, we're going to do this thing. It's going to be cool. Let's grow a community. And by the way, that's traditionally what crypto projects do. They'll say, here's the vision, here's the white paper, here's the pitch deck of our project. And by the way, here's the roadmap, and the platform of this project won't be available until, Q4 of 2023, but we're going to release the token for sale now. And in other words, they're growing the community upon the hype of the expected value of what it is they're creating. And that's really the downfall of crypto to some degree, is that you really need to develop the platform before you or as you create your community, and then release your token, and then it's going to be that much more valuable to all parties involved. And that's what Dirk is doing. He's saying, look, we're going to release this minimal viable product, and we're going to release San Francisco with the current community that we have, and we're going to allow that to be the driver that grows our community so that it will feed what we're doing with Manhattan. In other words, he's not just selling, he's not trying to build a community just based on the expectation of what Upland will eventually be. And there's been so many of these metaverse projects that are just selling vaporware tokens based on the vaporware of what that metaverse will be eventually.
Literally like smoke and mirrors.
It's all smoke and mirrors.
Like it's like it's all hype based. It's all like, look at what it's an idea. They're selling an idea.
Yeah.
There's not actually much development.
That's
going
right.
on.
In fact,
with actually probably the majority.
Yeah.
Of a lot of these other projects out there.
Probably 98% of them. And I would say that Mark Cuban, his mistake in his analysis when he said that buying real estate is the stupidest shit ever, I think he's playing into what the traditional market of crypto has been so far, and that is all these projects that say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to build this, and it's going to change the world, and we're going to launch our our tokens now, even though the thing that we're going to do isn't going to happen for another year or so.
And then it's not changing the world, and that's why he's saying it's really dumb to think that there's value in that.
Yeah, and that's why he's saying you got to have community, right? That's just obvious. That's just so crypto 101. You got to have a big community, but the way to have big community,
a lot of people backing and believing in the project.
Yeah, there's got to be hype. There's got to be interest. There's got to be demand. And Dirk is just saying, like, bro, why are you hammering on the concept of land and touting community when it's going to take the sale of land to create the community in the metaverse?
Yeah, and land is the key. Like, if you think of the real world economy, like real estate is at the core of a massive part of our economy, right? And like, no business could be built, no anything without like owning.
Yeah,
it's all starts with land, like,
right? And that's the second point that Dirk is saying, is that land is the foundation upon most economies.
Yeah,
and without land, labor, entrepreneurship, and what was the capital is going to just fall flat without having at least this limited resource of land upon which you can found all of the other
exactly
things.
And so if we take ourselves back into the beginning of, you know, humankind, whatever, like as we've evolved as humanity and as a society, land did not have as much value back in the day as it like land has continued to grow in value.
Right.
We're pretty much at the peak of, at least in the United States, of value of real estate,
right,
that it's like ever been.
Right. It's for sure.
It peaked recently.
Yeah.
And because like the businesses you can build on it, like the value of owning land, if you own a really big property, you can build a nice house on it. You can have a nice sanctuary. Like a lot of people are working from home now, so owning big enough land where they can have an office and like all these different types of things has made it more valuable. And we all agree that owning a large amount of land in a big city is valuable.
Yeah.
And so Upland is trying to bring this idea of, well, the value will come, but you have to buy the land. Someone years ago, like hundreds of years ago, people were investing in this land for cheap.
Right.
And now, like, you have this, like, concept of, like, at least where I'm from, like, in Salt Lake City. On the outskirts of Salt Lake City and all the suburban areas, there was a lot of farmland. And specifically where I live now, there was a lot of farmland, and farmers are now some of the wealthiest people because they held on to that land, and they're the ones selling that land to McDonald's, to like all
developers.
These big developers coming and wanting to create businesses on that land where a lot of people live.
Right.
Because the closer you are to where demand is happening, and you could see how that's going to eventually come into it's guaranteed going to happen that a metaverse, there will be one metaverse at least that is very successful and has land and has created this value just like the real world. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so do you think the same economic principles when Dirk's making the argument land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship is the key principles of an economy, does that apply to the principle of the metaverse being successful? Like I know I kind of already asked you that earlier.
Yeah,
but like,
I believe it's true. I mean, I do think that Dirk is much smarter than I am when it comes to economics, especially macroeconomics. But I agree with him. I mean, think back to when North America was discovered.
Yeah.
The reason people came over here from Europe or UK to this new land, initially there were several reasons. One, of course, was religious freedom. The other was because of the resources that were on this land. They weren't saying, hey, there's a lot of land here that I can buy up. They were saying, let's go over to that land and get the resources from that land, and it'll make us wealthy, right? And so they were thinking from from an entrepreneurialism standpoint, as well as, again, those groups who came over here for freedom of worship and freedom of religion and freedom of tyranny to some degree. But once they got here, though, then it was a question of, hey, if I really want these resources, and if we really want to maximize my ability to harvest these resources and then capitalize on the value of these resources, I need to acquire more land, right? And so like land became, even in the New World, the definition of wealth and the definition of prosperity. There's just countless examples across the world. But in the digital world, it's the same way. Like imagine the metaverse, but without any limits around boundaries, geographical boundaries, or land. And it's just this gray matter, and you have to within that gray matter find a way to make money, or to find a way to play games, or find a way to exist. And it's like, what would that be? Well, how would you harvest resources? How would you create a business? You could create a URL, I suppose, within that, but you've still got to have the resources with which to create the business around that. So at any rate, as long as the metaverse continues to follow the rules of the real world, land will always be a driving resource that needs to be established.
I totally agree, and I think it makes sense that Web3, the metaverse, should follow the same principles that like make the real world go round.
Yeah.
Like the same thing that like we all agree that like these are foundational principles that like all of the economy is built on. You can't like change. It's like math. You can't change. 1 + 1 = 2, right? Like, so that's kind of how I'm thinking about this. Like the same economic principles apply to the metaverse as the real world, because that's what we were talking about before the show, right? Like it's tribalism, or you were talking about the book.
Sapiens. Yeah.
Sapiens.
Yeah. So in Sapiens, there's this great chapter And shout out to Jenny McCord Burrow, who shared this with me. But Sapiens has this article or this chapter about the concept of shared fiction. And shared fiction is really a concept that helps and drives the value behind all currencies. Even though you can look at a currency and say that that currency is pegged to U.S. gold or some type of commodity, it's just an agreement. It's just a perceived agreement that this particular currency has this amount of value with this amount of metal, precious metal. And even to the gold, it's like, who decides that gold is more valuable than granite? It's all about scarcity and demand. And so it's just this shared
and perceived value.
Yeah, it's a perceived value. It's a shared fiction. And crypto and metaverse, it's built on the same principle as every other currency that's ever existed in the history of mankind, because of this shared fiction. We have agreed that the U.S. dollar means X of value. It used to be pegged to gold in the Federal Reserve, but when Lyndon B. Johnson came in, he made a change that would no longer be this case, and it's never gone back. And so a dollar is this shared agreement and shared perceived value of what a dollar is equal to. I could go into the dollar store and say, hey, I want to buy half of what you've got here, and I want to buy it with $1. And they'd say, well, that doesn't work because $1 isn't valuable enough for all the things we have in here. And I'd say, well, I disagree. I think this dollar should equal the value of everything. And of course, that's ludicrous, but the concept is the same, is that it's just a shared understanding of what the perceived value of that dollar is. And when you have the metaverse, it's no different. There's no difference whatsoever. The thing that I worry about is if there's multiple and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different metaverses, that there's so many that that each one are unable to create a vibrant community, then that's a problem. But if all of them are consolidated to some degree in some kind of shared experience, such that any metaverse traveler comes to this consolidated metaverse, then we are able to really employ the perceived and shared fiction values establishments around land, entrepreneurialism, what were the other two? Capital,
land, labor, capital,
and labor. So, at any rate, I don't think there's anything different. I think Mark Cuban didn't really think through this one very well, and I think that Dirk basically schooled him.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. The big thing that sticks out to me is kind of like, land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. Like, metaverses, I think, are going to be kind of like the future of social media. Like, and imagine social media being a place where you can, like, we already have this massive, like, influencer. Like, I come from a marketing background. You have influencers are pretty much the mass marketers of today. Influencers are, YouTube influencers are pretty much bigger than mainstream media.
For sure.
I think we're going to see the economy evolve that way where, and I think Dirk kind of explained that really well when he talks about user-generated content, what people like, perceived value, all of these points. Yeah, it really became really clear for me.
Yeah.
And the platforms of tomorrow are the social media platforms of today.
Yeah.
But evolved.
Yeah.
Into a Web3. They're not owned by YouTube and TikTok and these corporations. They're owned by everyone. And the whole idea of Upland and a lot of the metaverses that will be the most successful metaverses, I think, are decentralized. We talk about, I think one of the next big disruptions we see is banks being disrupted by DeFi.
Right.
We have, all these other blockchain and crypto-based things that are really going to be the disruptions of tomorrow to change our economy completely, where we don't give value to these Google and these massive corporations. I know I'm putting this podcast on YouTube. Please don't shut me down, but Google, YouTube, I don't think is here to stay forever. I think everything gets disrupted eventually.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
Walmart used to be everything, and then Amazon came along and just destroyed it.
Right.
Like I think Web3 is the destruction of all the massive internet, like Facebook, Amazon. Web3 is the destruction of those eventually. Like and the
I agree.
People taking back their power. It's like people no longer giving power to this entity that like it is controlling to them. It's almost like a rebellion, I've said before.
Yeah.
Like
no, for sure.
That's the whole like message behind Web3. People taking their power back and saying we can own this unanimously.
Yeah.
And we can make the decisions.
Yeah, and you know what I love about that is that there's nobody asking the world to do this. It's the people who's making it happen.
Yeah.
I love that. The other thing I would say is that as everybody is feeling, we're in the middle of this bear market right now, right? And everyone's like, is there a value? Is there a future in crypto? Maybe not. Maybe that was just a 2001 thing, kind of stuff. There's a lot happening right now with some of the key blockchains. We all know that Ethereum's about ready to really start get serious, rolling out ETH 2.0 with the whatever fork merge that's happening here in September. It'll start in September, eventually getting to the point where gas fees are basically nil and speed is incredible.
Which has to happen.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Ethereum's going to be amazing soon. Cardano's the same way. Cardano, was $3 back in September of 2021. Then we just all watched it drop down to where it's at right now, which is like 45 cents.
Jeez.
And but Cardano
they're staying strong.
Oh, dude, they just pushed some stuff to the test net. There's been some controversy around it, but it's about ready to hit it's going to move forward. It's going to be just fine, and it's going to be powerful. Like if I were anybody out there, I would look at Polygon. I would look at Ethereum. I would look at Cardano and any projects, level 2 projects upon those. But my point is this: during a bear market, that is the best thing that could happen to crypto is this bear market. Because what's going to happen is a couple of things. One is the projects that are serious about creating value are going to continue during this bear market in quietly advancing their technology without the continued pecking from, where's Lambo? When's Lambo? Or everyone being critiqued. It's like all the energy of peripheral investors in crypto have all gone away. And now it's only the hardcore people that are still surrounding it. And all these blockchains are doing well. They're quietly making progress. And when that bull market hits, they're going to be ready. And all the level 2s projects on top of it are going to be ready. And the people who hold into this bull market or this bear market are the ones who are going to make a crap ton of money. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because I know that the floor has dropped in a lot of major cities within Upland, but those who stick with it, hold your properties, start thinking about creating businesses, like be thoughtful, like go back in history, look at who made money in the new world of the American continent, who came into the 1700s into the American continent And then into the 1800s and the early 1900s, who were the ones who made money? What were they doing? What did the Rockefellers do to make money in the United States in the early or late 1800s and early 1900s? They harvested steel, and they became the owner of, or the producer of, most of the steel in the United States. And it wasn't a brilliant idea. None of that was brilliant. It's just that they did it. And right now in this bear market, when it's quiet and everything's quiet, find out a way. Start being creative. Look through history and see who made what with businesses, and start creating ideas and start creating those businesses, so that when the bear market comes back, and it will, you are positioned and ready to reap in the profits.
Yeah, and I love that. I really think that the bear market overall will separate the weak from the strong.
Yeah.
It will bring to light the projects that are all talk and the projects that are really in this for the long run, because they have a long-term vision. They're dedicated to keep going and building what they've built.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
We haven't seen Upland start firing anybody. We haven't seen Upland start, closing out. They're looking at this 10 years down the road.
Yeah.
They're looking at.
Dirk's not disappeared. He's still
Exactly.
there. He's still making public announcements. He's still publishing things. We still see advancements in the game. There's no reason why anyone should feel concerned about where this is headed.
Yeah, and we have to admit, we are in a bear market with crypto. Upland has traditionally recruited mostly crypto people. However, I think we're getting to the point where they're going to start recruiting more gamers, people in gaming, and people who just looking for different experiences as these Web3 or as these third-party development tools continue to grow. We're going to see the game continue to evolve, and I think, honestly, it's a great time to be in. I think we're ready to kind of close out the episode.
That's all I got.
McSqueeb, thanks for being here.
So great to be here, man. I love
what do
you.
you want to share with the people to close us out?
Just if you didn't listen to everything, just listen to this. Stick with it. This is going to be huge, and stick with it because the bull market is temporary. Soon enough, another year, 18 months, 10 months, whatever it's going to be, the bear market will be here, and you will thank yourself for sticking with it when that comes back, because you're going to make the gains. That's all I got.
There you have it, folks. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one. Peace out.